Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the week beginning the 7th of October 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your weekly Steam deals. These will run all the way through to next Monday, and a new set of deals will appear at 10 a.m. PST. The prices that I'm giving out are accurate at the time of recording this video, so that means that if they change in the meantime, I'm sorry, but I'm not a far-seer. Unless otherwise mentioned, the Australian price is equal to the American price. So let's kick it off, shall we, with Worms Revolution. 50% off, taking it down to $7.49, €7 or €5.49 in Tier 2 nations, as well as £5.99 in the UK. Not a bad entry, I've got to say, when it comes to the Worms franchise, which is, let's be honest, a franchise that has been horrendously overdone to freaking death. That's the main problem with that particular series. The iterations are slow, and more often than not, the changes that are made kind of mess with the formula that was basically perfected during Worms Armageddon. However, it's not bad, yeah? It has some interesting ideas. They're not all good ideas, but they're interesting nonetheless. The game has a class system, for instance, which is a little odd, to say the least. Why you'd have a class system in Worms, no one knows, but it does add a different dynamic to the game. It's also got some fluid physics, so you're able to drown worms a little bit easier. There's actually a selection of water-based weaponry in that game. It's solid, decent for the price. If you haven't played Worms in a long time, this is a decent time to get back into it and a reasonable title to do it with. But I just don't feel that Worms is ever going to get any better at this stage. I'm pretty sure we're kind of done with Worms now. And Worms Revolution honestly is anything but. I would call it Worms Iteration. But I guess that's why I'm not in marketing. Fieldrunners, 50% off, takes down to $2.49, €2.49 and £1.99. Personally, if I were to pick up either of these, I would grab Fieldrunners 2, which unfortunately is a little bit more expensive than that, but it's definitely the better of the two. It's not bad, actually, I've got to say. It's a game that my wife had a good amount of fun playing, honestly, and it's a pretty damn challenging tower defense game. It's got a lot of nice, colorful units on the screen at any given time, which I certainly appreciate, and there's a lot of fun involved in trying to deal with massive hordes of enemies instead of organized lines of them, so it's a little bit more frantic than your average tower defense game. If you are looking for a TD, you can certainly do an awful lot worse than Fieldrunners 2, and if you're bored of the standard wave after wave of slow-moving creatures, then I think you'll enjoy this a little bit more, since it is a lot more frantic. Instead of just following a set path, the actual units that you're going to be fighting will make some decisions on their own, so they're actually going to pick their own path. So it's less of a traditional TD, and I think that might be enough to push some people over the edge. Regardless, though, we are still talking about a tower defense game on PC, which is a fairly saturated market in that regard as it is. Commander, Conquest of the Americas, 75% off. That's $2.49, €2.49, £1.99. This is not what I would call an amazing trading and conquest game, honestly, as much as I would wish otherwise. I tried this out after playing East India Company, which also had plenty of its own problems. This is something of a successor there from Nitro Games, published by Paradox. It's alright for that price. Like, that's what I would definitely say there. It's got its own problems, like the combat is not as involved as it should be, and really the game seems to try and steer you away from it, even though you're still going to have to do it from time to time. It's almost like it's embarrassed by the combat. The actual empire building part of it is reasonable, as is the trading, but things do tend to chug along at a fairly glacial pace, and the actual RTS aspects of it are fairly weak. But for that price, if you are looking for something a little bit more laid back when it comes to trading and things like that, that doesn't really have too many consequences attached to it, it's not a game that punishes you particularly hard for mistakes, then it might very well be worth looking into. Unfortunately, we are lacking in the age of sale department when it comes to games these days, so you're not really stacked full of choices. For this price, this is probably worth dipping into if you have an interest in that particular era. Teleglitch Die More Edition, 75% off, $3.25, €3.25 and £2.25. This is a really good game, and the Die More Edition's even better. It should really be described as a roguelike-ish version of Doom, and it is a top-down shooter and it's a very, very difficult one at that. You are able to acquire parts to craft weapons, and you scavenge for ammo and secret locations in fairly randomly generated levels against very tough enemies that can murder you very, very quickly. The thing that kind of makes this game stand out, and also is perhaps its biggest enemy, is the graphics style that it uses. It tries to convey the idea of momentum on the screen, and its graphics are very abstract, yeah? They're kind of impressionistic, but some would call it bloody hideous, and they wouldn't be wrong. It really only gives you an idea of what it is you're fighting, but it's a damn good game if you like a challenge, I've got to say. It's very, very impressive in that respect. So if you are looking for something difficult to cut your teeth on, you're not going to find too many games like this, and the other games that try it simply don't do it as well. There's a little more satisfying than trying to gun down monsters in this game, because the way that the weapons actually interact with the environment and the enemies, and the way that the strange graphic style actually shows the kinetic force of a weapon, is very unusual. So yeah, Teleglitch, absolutely. For that price, no doubt about it. Probably my highlight of the sale this week. Betrayer, 33% off. That is $10.04, €9.37, and £8.03. Betrayer is a little odd, to say the least. It has a very strange graphic style to it. It's a first-person adventure game, but it happens to be done, for the most part, in black and white. However, they have splashes of red in there for good measure. It can, for the most part, be described as a first-person shooter with some pretty heavy adventure elements. It is still in early access, so once again, I would warn anyone against buying early access games unless you're absolutely sure that you want them right this very minute. Usually, there's no reason to. So in this case, it's hard to recommend it, especially since I haven't had enough chance to really dig into it. I'm afraid I can't really give you a one or the other on this one, because I simply haven't had the time to play, so I'm hoping to maybe in the next couple of weeks tackle it on Alpha Strike. But as it stands, it's a 33% off discount. That's not really a big deal on a $15 game, so this I think is going to be one of those wait-and-see kind of titles. Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded, 40% off, that's $12, €11.39 or $8.39 in Tier 2, and £8.99. Okay, well, this is the remake of the original Leisure Suit Larry in the Land of the Lounge Lizards, which was, at the time, considered an adult point-and-click game. Basically, it's a bunch of filthy, perverted humor and toilet stuff for the most part, in which you must guide Larry around and attempt to get him laid in a point-and-click adventure setting. This was redone via a Kickstarter, and not exactly received all that well, and there's a few reasons for that, including the notion that this kind of game is outdated, which perhaps is true. I mean, let's be honest, it's a bunch of dumb and sexist humor, and the mechanics live in a land about 20 years ago, along with its sensibilities, and that's not necessarily something that many people would find particularly fun. That said, it does have some pretty good humor in it, despite the fact a lot of it is kind of sexist and kind of crude. There are some good lines in there, and the narrator is actually surprisingly funny. The animation quality is what really disappointed me, yeah, because the actual art style, pretty good, yeah? They polish it up nicely, it looks really, really good, but the animations let it down, which is very unfortunate. It might be worth a playthrough if you're looking for a little bit of filthy humor, and you don't mind the fact that the game's basically like 2 hours long unless you go looking around for all of the collectibles. I certainly wouldn't call it anywhere near as horrible as some people have made it out to be, and it's definitely not the patriarchy, but regardless, it's not a great game either. It's middle of the road and more of a nostalgia hit than anything else. Robin Hood, The Legend of Sherwood, 75% off. That is $2.49, €2.49, and £2.24. It's interesting that we're getting a lot of these older titles suddenly popping up on Steam. I noticed that most of the games on the front page are actually pretty damn ancient. It's like Valve's trying to get on the GOG Act right here, but yeah, Robin Hood is a very old game indeed. It's not a bad one, though. If you remember Commandos from back in the day, it's basically like that, but with Robin Hood, and it's a tough strategic challenge. Pretty damn good, but also bloody ancient. So it may very well be something that you want to avoid solely on that basis. What I would absolutely love to see is those games brought bang up to date with a better UI and HD graphics, because they would look great. There's a lot of pre-rendered stuff in there. It already looks decent considering, but things like the character models and everything, and the animation quality, and just the general clunkiness of the game severely let it down. Again, something kind of worthy of a nostalgia hit more so than anything else. Flatout Complete Pack, 75% off, taking it down to $10, €10, and £8.74. So this pack includes Flatout 1 and 2, Ultimate Carnage, and Chaos and Destruction, which is Flatout 3, which is the bad one. So I would actually not recommend buying this pack at all. And the reason is, there's no real point in getting it for Flatout 1, because Flatout 2 is just better in every way. Ultimate Carnage is arguably better than Flatout 2. It's mostly just a remake of Flatout 2 with better graphics and longer loading times for the most part. And then Flatout 3 was actually rubbish. So, I like Flatout. At least I like Flatout 2 and Ultimate Carnage at any rate. They're pretty damn fun. If you're looking for a Destruction Derby style game, that's what Flatout basically is. It even has various modes like that, and some rather outlandish ones, which include attempting to hit targets with your driver as he flies face first out of the windscreen, which is not bad. That's a good amount of fun. I like it as a racing game. I like the idea of destroying other people's cars and wrecking my own and flying out the windscreen. So, Flatout 2 and Ultimate Carnage, I would definitely recommend it. Chaos and Destruction, and just the pack in general, is probably a no. If you want to know what's wrong with Flatout 3, oh god, where to freaking begin? There is so much. The AI cheats horribly, it's got terrible physics, the car models absolutely suck, dreadful sound design across the board. Just don't. It looks nothing like the previous games. Governor of Poker 2, 75% off, taking it down to $2.50, €2.50, and £2. It's a poker game. It's one of those casual games that are released in 4:3 resolution because what the hell's the point in doing anything else, right? Because no one's gonna know better. You can actually play this game for free in many places online, and the premium edition, of course, has more content, but for the most part, if you want to get the experience of this game, just Google Governor of Poker 2, and you will find the ability to play it online. It's mostly just a casual poker game with a tell system for the cartoon characters, which lets you try and figure out what the opponents are doing. It's got a fairly limited management aspect to it in the sense that you're able to organize your own tournaments and also take control of things like oil fields. If for some reason you really feel like playing poker against the AI, it's a decent choice, although with Poker Night at the inventory available on Steam, I'm not really sure why you'd pick this one. Cobra Complete Pack, 60% off, that is $7.20, €6 and £4.80. I don't really think so. This is a collection of casual games that initially came out on mobile devices and were then ported over. It has iBomber Defense, it's got iBomber Attack in it, it's also got Storm in a Teacup, which is a little kind of puzzle platform, as well as iBomber Defense Pacific. iBomber Defense is just an action-orientated tower defense, so basically it's tower defense with a little bit of personal involvement in it. It's solid for what it is, but it's definitely not special in any real respect. iDefense Pacific is obviously an upgrade on that. iBomber Attack is the other way around, so you get to just drive a tank around and blow stuff up. None of these games are anything to write home about. They're not terrible by any stretch, but these are the kind of games that you want to be playing on your phone and not your PC for the most part. They don't really excel in any particular area. They're very much middle of the road. MX vs ATV Reflex, 80% off. That's $4. €4 and £3. For the most part, a motocross and quad biking game. It's a fairly lengthy series of them, in fact, and it's not too bad, actually. It's pretty fun. However, it's not what I would call a particularly good-looking game by any stretch, and it just doesn't seem to have the AAA kind of quality that you're really looking for in a game like this. It's a little bit low budget. It's also not that different from the previous titles in the series. It hasn't really evolved it in any real respect, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. It's decent for what it is. I had fun tearing around the tracks. I don't know a damn thing about quad biking and motocross, but it was still fun to tear around the tracks on one of those vehicles. So, not a bad little title if you're looking for some dirt racing fun. And finally, 4 Elements. That's 85% off. $1.50, €1.50, and £1.50. I'm sorry, but I haven't played it. I think you pretty much know that I haven't played it. I can't tell you much about it, but I can tell you that the point of the game is to match the colors together in order to allow this sort of weird pinky life force stuff to make its way through to the end of the level. That's it, guys. That's all I've got on it. I'm sorry, I don't play every game in existence. It's definitely not something that's really come to my attention. Alright, folks, that is me done for the week. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox, and I will be back same time on Tuesday to round up your weekly Steam deals. I'll see you next time.